The greasy smell of diesel and stale coffee hit me first, a far cry from Sarah's usual lavender-scented world. I decided to surprise her with lunch. Chicken salad sandwiches, her favorite, nestled in a checkered cloth inside my warm messenger bag. She'd been so stressed lately, working extra shifts at this truck stop diner. I still didn't quite understand why a graphic designer with her talent was waitressing, but she insisted it was temporary, a way to make ends meet while her freelance career took off. I wanted to believe her. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The place was mostly empty, a few truckers nursing mugs of coffee at the counter, their faces etched with the miles they'd traveled. Sarah wasn't at the till. I scanned the booths, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. It wasn't like her to leave the counter unattended. Looking for someone, hon? A woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda called out from behind the counter, wiping it down with a damp cloth. Yeah, my wife, Sarah Olson. She works here. I try to keep my voice light, casual. Brenda's eyes flickered towards the back, a strange look crossing her face before she forced a smile. She's, taking a break. In the back. Oh, okay. I'll just wait for her. I shifted my weight, the messenger bag feeling suddenly heavy. Maybe you shouldn't. Brenda's voice was hesitant, her gaze darting nervously towards a door marked staff only. My unease intensified. What was going on? Is everything all right? Before Brenda could answer, a sound drifted from behind the closed door. A muffled giggle, feminine and undeniably Sarah's. But it was a giggle I hadn't heard in a long time, a playful, flirtatious sound that belonged to a Sarah I thought I knew, a Sarah who seemed to have vanished somewhere along the way of bills and worries. Then, a deeper voice, a man's chuckle, rough and unfamiliar. My blood ran cold. My feet felt rooted to the sticky linoleum floor. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just talking to a colleague. Maybe they were watching a funny video on someone's phone. But the knot in my stomach twisted tighter, a cold premonition settling in my chest. Against Brenda's increasingly frantic "Sir, you really shouldn't," I found myself moving towards the staff-only door. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. The sound from within had become clearer now, hushed whispers punctuated by soft moans. Moans that sounded intimate. I pushed the door open just a crack. The scene that unfolded before my eyes ripped through me like a jagged shard of glass. The small, cluttered room was dimly lit by a single bare bulb. Sarah was there, her back to the door. She was pressed against a man, a burly figure in a faded denim shirt and a trucker hat perched precariously on his head. His hands were everywhere, cupping her face, then sliding down her neck, disappearing beneath the hem of her uniform shirt. And Sarah had her eyes closed, her lips slightly parted, a look of pleasure on her face. My breath hitched in my throat. The chicken salad sandwiches in my bag suddenly felt like lead weights. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't my Sarah. My Sarah, the woman I'd promised forever to, the woman I loved more than anything in the world. He turned his head slightly, and I saw his face in profile, weather-beaten, with a thick, salt and pepper beard. A stranger. A complete stranger who was touching my wife like she was his. Then Sarah shifted, and I saw her face fully. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a fleeting moment, they locked with mine through the sliver of the open door. Her expression shifted from something akin to bliss to sheer, unadulterated terror. Her eyes widened, her mouth forming a silent O. The trucker, oblivious, chuckled again, his hand now moving lower, his fingers tracing the curve of her hip. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The extra shifts, the vague excuses, the sudden defensiveness whenever I asked about her day, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just a break. This wasn't just talking. This was something else. Something much, much worse. My vision swam. The greasy smell of the diner seemed to suffocate me. The sounds from the room blurred into a sickening cacophony. I stumbled back, the door creaking slightly, and Brenda gasped. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat was constricted, my chest tight with a pain I'd never felt before. I just turned and walked out of the diner, the messenger bag slipping from my numb fingers and hitting the ground with a dull thud, the carefully prepared lunch spilling onto the dirty pavement. The image of Sarah's terrified eyes, the trucker's hand on her hip, the raw, undeniable truth of what I had just witnessed. It was all burned into my mind, a brand seared onto my soul. My reality, the life I thought I knew, the marriage I believed in, it had just shattered into a million pieces. And in that moment, standing on the side of a dusty highway, the only thing I knew for sure was that nothing would ever be the same again. The drive home was a blur. Each red light felt like an eternity. Each green light, a cruel acceleration towards an empty future. The image of Sarah with that man replayed in my mind, a sickening loop that threatened to drown me in despair. I parked the car in the driveway, the familiar sight of our little blue house now feeling alien, tainted. I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Not yet. Instead, I drove. Drove until I found myself in the familiar, comforting chaos of the warehouse where I worked as a logistics manager. It was late, the night shift in full swing, the rhythmic beeping of forklifts a strange kind of solace. I knew Michael, my boss, was still here. He often stayed late, a workaholic with a surprisingly kind heart beneath his gruff exterior. I found him in his small, cluttered office, the glow of multiple computer screens illuminating his tired face. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Mark, what are you doing here? Everything all right?" My carefully constructed facade crumbled. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The words tumbled out of me in a rush, disjointed and raw, punctuated by choked sobs. I told him everything. The surprise lunch, the greasy diner, the muffled sounds, the open door, the horrifying scene, Sarah's face, the stranger's touch. Michael listened patiently, his usual booming voice softened with concern. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. He just let me talk, let me unravel. When I finally ran out of words, the silence in the small office felt heavy, thick with unspoken understanding. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "Mark, I'm so damn sorry. That's brutal." I just nodded, tears still streaming down my face. The shame and humiliation were almost as overwhelming as the heartbreak. Michael cleared his throat. "Look, the first thing you need to do is take care of yourself. Have you thought about getting tested?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. The possibility hadn't even crossed my mind in the initial shock, but now it felt like another layer of betrayal, another potential wound. I shook my head, feeling sick. "All right," Michael said firmly. "Here's what we're going to do. First thing tomorrow, I'll call my doctor. He'll get you in for a full panel. No questions asked. It'll be discreet, Mark. Nobody here needs to know." His immediate action, his practical support, caught me off guard. It was more than I could have asked for. "Michael, I don't know what to say. Thank you." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't mention it. Now, what about her?" I shrugged, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. "I don't know." I walked out. I couldn't face her. Michael nodded slowly. "I understand. Look, Mark, you've been a damn good employee. Reliable, hardworking. You deserve better than this." He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "There's an opening in our Phoenix branch. Logistics manager. The pay is a bit better, cost of living is lower. It's a fresh start, Mark. A real chance to get away from all this. Phoenix, Arizona, 1,000 miles away from Sarah, from our blue house, from the shattered remnants of my old life." The idea was both terrifying and strangely appealing. A clean break, a chance to rebuild. But could I just walk away? Could I leave everything behind? I don't know, Michael. That's a big decision. My voice was barely a whisper. Take some time to think about it. No pressure, but the offer's there. I can make the arrangements quickly if you want it. Housing stipend, help with relocation, the whole 9 yards. His generosity was overwhelming. In the midst of my personal crisis, my boss, a man I'd always seen as slightly gruff and distant, was offering me a lifeline. A new job, a new city, a new beginning. It was more than I deserved, more than I could have ever expected. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, the hum of the warehouse a constant backdrop to my racing thoughts. Phoenix. The word echoed in my mind, a symbol of escape, of hope, of the unknown. Could I really leave? Could I abandon the life I had built, even though it had just crumbled before my eyes? By the time the first rays of dawn peeked through the loading dock doors, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, I had made a decision. It wasn't easy. It was terrifying. But the thought of staying here, of facing Sarah, of living in the shadow of her betrayal, it was unbearable. I found Michael finishing up some paperwork in his office. He looked up as I walked in, a question in his eyes. "Michael," I said, my voice hoarse but firm, "I'll take the job in Phoenix." A small smile touched his lips. "I figured you might." "Good. I'll get the ball rolling first thing this morning." "You did the right thing, Mark. You deserve happiness." His words were a balm to my wounded soul. As I walked out of the warehouse and into the pale morning light, a strange mix of grief and anticipation washed over me. I was leaving everything behind. My wife, my home, my past. But maybe, just maybe, in the sun-drenched landscape of Arizona, I could find a new beginning. A new life. A life where the memory of Sarah's betrayal wouldn't haunt every waking moment. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since opening that staff-only door, a tiny spark of hope flickered within me. The unexpected kindness of my boss had given me a chance to pick up the pieces and start again. Now, I just had to be brave enough to take it. The Arizona sun beat down with a relentless intensity, a stark contrast to the cool, familiar drizzle of home. My new apartment was small and impersonal, the beige walls echoing the emptiness I felt inside. The job at the Phoenix warehouse was demanding, keeping me busy, but the nights were long and filled with the ghosts of what used to be. I tried to focus on the future, on building a new life amidst the cacti and desert heat, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Sarah, to our blue house, to the kids. Michael had been incredibly efficient. Within a week, I had a new job, a small apartment, and a sense of displacement that settled deep in my bones. I hadn't spoken to Sarah since that day at the diner. Part of me wanted to call, to scream, to demand answers. But another part, the larger, more wounded part, just wanted to forget she ever existed. The kids, though, that was different. Liam, my eldest, with his mischievous grin and love for soccer. Maya, the middle one, a budding artist with a heart full of empathy. And little Chloe, my princess, with her infectious giggle and unwavering belief that I could fix anything. They were my world, my everything. Or so I thought. Before I left, in a haze of anger and confusion, I had contacted a lawyer. One of the things I discussed was the possibility of getting full custody. The thought of Sarah doing what she was doing and being responsible for my children filled me with a cold dread. My lawyer had suggested a DNA test, just to be sure, given the circumstances. I hadn't really thought much of it at the time, just another bureaucratic hurdle in the messy process of divorce. I'd agreed, provided samples, and then left for Phoenix, pushing the thought to the back of my mind. A week into my new life, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. It was from the law firm. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The legal jargon swam before my eyes, but one sentence jumped out, bold and stark. The results of the DNA analysis indicate no biological link between Mr. Mark Olson and the minor children, Liam, Maya, and Chloe Olson. The world tilted. The beige walls of my apartment seemed to close in on me. No biological link? My children, not mine? It couldn't be true. There had to be a mistake. I reread the sentence again and again, but the cold, hard truth remained. Liam, Maya, Chloe, the three little people I had loved and raised as my own for the past 8 years, they weren't mine. The shock was so profound it was almost physical. I sank onto the edge of the worn couch, the letter clutched in my hand like a death sentence. 8 years. 8 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, school plays, and first steps. 8 years of laughter, tears, and unconditional love. All based on a lie. A lie so monumental it shattered the very foundation of my existence. Who was her father? Had Sarah known all along? The question swirled in my mind, a chaotic storm of disbelief and agony. This wasn't just about her betrayal with a stranger in a truck stop diner. This was a betrayal that went deeper, a deception that had poisoned the very core of my family. Just as I was reeling from this devastating revelation, my phone rang. It was my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. His voice was grave. "Mark, I have some further news regarding Sarah." My heart sank. What else could possibly go wrong? "What is it?" I asked, my voice flat. "I'm afraid Sarah was arrested last night, along with several other waitresses at that truck stop diner." "Arrested? What for?" "It appears there was an undercover operation. They were all charged with engaging in prostitution." The words hung in the air, heavy and sickening. Sex work. That's what it was. Not just a moment of weakness, not just a mistake. A deliberate choice, a secret life she had been leading right under my nose. And now, she was arrested for it. The irony was almost unbearable. Here I was, grappling with the earth-shattering news that my children weren't mine, while their mother was being arrested for her involvement in the very thing that had led to the unraveling of our marriage. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice somber. "Given the circumstances, the custody situation is complicated. The fact that you're not the biological father, it changes things significantly. However, her arrest and the nature of the charges, that will also be a factor." I barely registered his words. My mind was reeling. Double betrayal. Not only had Sarah been unfaithful, but she had also lied about the children. They weren't mine. The past 8 years of my life felt like a carefully constructed illusion, now brutally shattered. I hung up the phone, the weight of the 2 phone calls crushing me. I was alone in this strange apartment, thousands of miles away from everything I thought I knew. The woman I loved had been living a double life, and the children I adored weren't even biologically related to me. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and bitter. Grief, anger, confusion, despair. They all warred within me, tearing me apart. What was real? What had ever been real? Had our marriage been a complete fabrication? Had her love for me, for the children, been a lie? I looked around the empty apartment, the silence amplifying the turmoil within me. I had come to Phoenix, seeking a new beginning, a fresh start. But how could I start over when the very foundation of my past had been a lie? The unexpected kindness of Michael now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by this devastating double blow. What would happen to kids? What would happen to Sarah? And what in God's name was going to happen to me? The future stretched before me, a vast and terrifying unknown. The sterile scent of the lawyer's office was a stark contrast to the greasy smell of the diner, yet both held the distinct aroma of my life falling apart. Returning home was surreal. Our blue house looked the same, but the warmth had vanished, replaced by a chilling emptiness. The kids were staying with Sarah's sister, Emily, who looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, was surprisingly optimistic about the divorce proceedings. Sarah's arrest and the charges against her made her look like an unfit parent. The paternity revelation, while shocking, actually strengthened my case for custody as it removed any biological claim Sarah might have used to fight me. My focus was solely on the children. Despite the devastating news, they were still my kids. I had raised them, loved them, and I couldn't imagine my life without their chaotic energy and unconditional affection. The legal battle was swift, almost anticlimactic. Sarah, out on bail and facing serious charges, didn't put up much of a fight. Perhaps she was ashamed. Perhaps she knew she had no grounds. Whatever the reason, I was granted full custody. The relief was immense, but it was quickly overshadowed by the daunting reality of being a single parent to 3 children, all while navigating the wreckage of my marriage. Bringing the kids home was bittersweet. They were overjoyed to be back in their own house, but the absence of their mother hung heavy in the air. I tried to be strong, to reassure them, but their innocent questions, "Where's Mommy? When is she coming home?" were like tiny daggers twisting in my heart. The real challenge, however, came from the community. News travels fast in a small town. Sarah's arrest was the subject of hushed whispers at the grocery store, pointed stares at school events, and uncomfortable silences when I ran into old friends. The stigma of her actions clung to us like a persistent shadow. Other parents kept their children away from mine, worried about the kind of family they came from. I overheard snippets of conversations. "Poor Mark, that woman was always trouble. Imagine what those kids have been through." While some expressed sympathy, others treated us like we were contaminated, tainted by Sarah's choices. Liam, always sensitive, started acting out in school. Maya, usually so bubbly, became withdrawn and quiet. Even little Chloe, who was mostly oblivious, seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere, becoming clingier and more anxious. I found myself constantly explaining, deflecting, and trying to shield my children from the judgment of others. It was exhausting. I worked my regular hours at the local hardware store, then came home to cook dinner, help with homework, and try to be both a mother and a father to 3 grieving children. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. One afternoon, while at the park with the kids, a group of mothers I used to chat with regularly abruptly turned their backs when they saw us approaching. The blatant rejection stung. Liam, who had been excitedly showing me a drawing he'd made, noticed their reaction. His little face crumpled, and he whispered, "Daddy, why don't they like us anymore?" His question hit me harder than any judgmental stare. I knelt down, pulling him into a hug. "It's not you, buddy. They're just confused right now. But we know who our friends are, right?" I tried to sound confident, but inside, I was crumbling. The financial strain was also mounting. Sarah's income had been a significant part of our household budget, and now I was solely responsible for everything. I started taking on extra shifts at the hardware store, sacrificing what little free time I had. Just when I thought things couldn't get any harder, I received another letter from Mr. Henderson. Sarah's case was moving forward, and she was facing a significant amount of time. But that wasn't the unexpected part. Enclosed with the letter was another document, a request from Sarah. She wanted visitation rights for the children. My blood ran cold. After everything she had done, after the lies and the betrayal, she wanted to see the kids? The thought filled me with a mixture of anger and dread. How could I explain her absence, her actions to them? How could I allow her back into their lives after the pain she had caused? I stared at the letter, my hands shaking. This was a new battle, a new challenge I hadn't anticipated. I had fought for custody, believing that would be the end of it. But Sarah's request for visitation opened up a whole new chapter of uncertainty and potential heartache. What was I going to do? How could I protect my children from further pain? The weight of the decision pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. The future, once a blank canvas in Phoenix, was now a minefield of legal battles and emotional turmoil, right here in the town I thought I knew. The weight of Sarah's visitation request hung over me like a dark cloud. My lawyer advised me to consider it, suggesting that completely cutting her off might not be in the children's best interest in the long run. He proposed supervised visits, a neutral setting, and strict boundaries. I reluctantly agreed, my heart heavy with apprehension. The first visit was excruciating. Sarah looked gaunt and pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and longing. The children were wary, unsure of how to react to the woman who had been absent for so long. The conversation was stilted, filled with awkward silences and forced smiles. It was clear that the road to any kind of normalcy would be long and arduous. Amidst this ongoing turmoil, a beacon of light unexpectedly appeared in my life. Her name was Emily. She was a teacher at Maya's school, and we'd met at a parent-teacher conference. She had a warm smile and kind eyes, and we'd struck up a conversation about Maya's progress in our class. Over the next few months, we found ourselves talking more often about the kids, about books, about life. Emily was easy to talk to. She listened without judgment, offering quiet support and understanding. She had a gentle way about her that put both me and the children at ease. Liam, Maya, and Chloe took to her instantly. She helped them with their homework, played games with them in the park, and even baked cookies with Chloe, filling the house with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly, tentatively, a connection began to form between Emily and me. We started spending time together outside of school events, going for coffee, taking walks in the park after the kids were in bed. She never pried about my past, but she was always there to listen when I needed to talk. She understood the complexities of my situation, the pain I had endured, and the unwavering love I had for my children. Emily didn't try to replace Sarah. She simply offered a new kind of love and support, one that was built on honesty and genuine affection. She brought laughter back into our home, a lightness that had been missing for so long. She saw the good in me, the resilience I had shown, and she loved my children as if they were her own. As the months passed, my feelings for Emily deepened. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, to hearing her voice, to sharing the small moments of everyday life with her. She made me feel like I could finally move on, that happiness was still possible, even after everything I had been through. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves swirled around us in a golden dance, I took Emily's hand and looked into her eyes. "Emily," I said, my voice filled with emotion, "you and the kids, you brought so much joy back into my life. I can't imagine my future without you." I pulled a small velvet box from my pocket and opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but a radiant smile lit up her face. "Yes, Mark," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will." The kids were ecstatic when we told them the news. They adored Emily, and the thought of her becoming a permanent part of our family filled them with joy. Liam even made a little speech, welcoming her to our team. Life wasn't perfect. There were still difficult days, still moments when the memory of Sarah's betrayal would surface. But now, I had Emily by my side, a strong and loving partner to share the burdens and the joys. Sarah's supervised visits continued, a necessary but often uncomfortable reminder of the past. However, with Emily's support, I was able to navigate those encounters with more strength and clarity. Looking back, I never would have imagined my life taking such a dramatic and painful turn. The discovery at the diner, the devastating news about the children, the social stigma, it had all felt like too much to bear at times. But somehow I had persevered. I had picked up the shattered pieces of my reality, and with the unexpected kindness of my boss and the unwavering love of my children, I had started to rebuild. And now, standing in my living room, watching Emily help Chloe build a tower of blocks while Liam and Maya argued good-naturedly over a board game, a sense of profound peace settled over me. The Arizona sun had faded from memory, replaced by the gentle warmth of a love that felt true and lasting. My children were happy, healthy, and loved, and I had found love again, a love that promised a brighter future. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with Emily by my side, I knew we could face anything. My new dawn had arrived, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, unequivocally happy.